Dr. Sabo. Perfect. You are right on the ball. Well, wonderful. Well, we are going to go right into our next presentation. We have Dr. Sabo joining us. Dr. Sabo is the Utah Assistant State Veterinarian, and she is going to be talking with us today about emergency planning for small farms. I think this is a hugely important topic and likely something that a lot of us don't necessarily think about, how we will manage and take care of livestock and the other important things that we have on our small acreage or small farm. So Dr. Sabo, I will turn the time over to you. Again, we'll have people put their questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, and we will address those at the end. So thanks so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So my name is actually Dr. Sabo, but that's okay. It's frequently mispronounced, but that's all right. That's just how I know you are a prank caller, and that I don't have to answer the phone call. No, so I'm really excited to be here today to chat with you all. I will explain a little bit about what the state veterinarian's office is and what we do a little bit later in the presentation. But just wanted to let you guys know that I'm really excited to be here to chat with you. And my slides are not moving. Okay, there we go. Okay, so why bother planning for emergencies, right? That's definitely something that you guys might be thinking of. I'm sure you're all extremely busy. We've got a million things going on. Right now, it looks like we've got precipitation moving horizontally across the plan. So how do we spend the time when we've got a million other things to do trying to get ready for an emergency or a disaster? So what could be a disaster? Most people, when you think about a disaster, you could think about wildfires, really common here. We, especially on the Wasatch Front, we're all on a pretty big earthquake fault line. So that's definitely something that your emergency planners in your local areas think about a lot. But again, not something that's real common. Flooding, we just had an alert here in Salt Lake County about avalanches being a huge issue, and then droughts, of course, because we are in a persistent drought stage. But other things that could be disasters are man-made things. So, we saw the train derailment in Ohio that caused a spill of hazardous materials, an economic disaster. Maybe this is something just personally for your situation where maybe somebody gets hurt, somebody loses a job. That can be a really big disaster that you might want to have a plan for. And then, of course, cyber attacks. We had Dairy West was targeted for cyber challenges a few years back. And then for me, the thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about is biological issues. So in the state veterinarian's office, disease outbreaks are mostly what we spend our time dealing with. And so I'm going to kind of give you a rundown of why that's what I spend my time on. So I work at the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and within the Department of Ag and Food, we have a bunch of different divisions, and the division I work in is the Division of Animal Industry. You can see here we've got a number of different programs within animal industry, and within that I work in animal health, as you could imagine, being a veterinarian. We also have programs in aquaculture, brand inspection, which you guys are probably familiar with. We have a domestic elk program, horse racing, and then also our state inspected meat and poultry program. So those would be like your slaughter facilities that are, kind of smaller, that don't have enough time to employ a USDA federal level inspector. We actually have 24 state level inspectors that inspect state facilities. So within the animal health program, we consist of 4 people. It's my boss, Dr. Amanda Price. Hopefully you've heard or seen her moving around. She's been the state veterinarian for just 1 year, but she was in my position, the assistant state veterinarian, for many years, and she's responded to a ton of different situations. Second is me, the assistant state vet. Been in the position for about a year. And then we have 2 field veterinarians, Dr. Danilo Franco and Dr. Nicole Cossey. And they are the ones who sort of are out and about working on all sorts of disease responses and going to facilities and making sure that everything is in line. If you have any questions for us or you want to reach out to our animal health department directly. You can see that phone number there, and that will be at the end of my slide as well. So what the heck does the state veterinarian's office do? So this is kind of a busy slide because we are busy people. So like I said, one of the things we spend a lot of time on is disease preparedness and response. You guys might have seen an announcement last week from Idaho that there was actually a herd of cattle, of beef cows in a city about 5 miles north of the Utah border, north of Box Elder County, that experienced some death loss due to anthrax. And so that's something that we would respond to. We sort of teach people what they should consider. Luckily, anthrax isn't a disease that spreads animal to animal. It just sort of exists in the soil. And when the time is right, unfortunately, you hit the worst lottery ever and you get some animals that die from it. So if you guys have any questions about anthrax, just check out our website. But that's an example of what we do on a day-to-day basis. The next thing that we do is a lot of outreach and education. This photo here is me teaching animal control officers how to age a horse, so how to look into its mouth. Animal control officers are one of our big resources across the state for animal health, and so we want to make sure that they understand how to respond both to large and small animal challenges. But we're happy to come out and teach you whatever you would like to learn about animal health. So we do presentations on everything from New World screwworm to biosecurity to emergency preparedness. Another big thing we work on is animal traceability. So making sure that animals have all the proper official identification and that all of our animal programs are going well. So Dr. Page probably chatted with you guys a bit or has chatted with you in the past about scrapie tagging. And so that's something that we're really involved with, making sure that the US as a whole can be declared scrapie free, hopefully in the next 2 years. And then finally, brings us to why I'm talking to you today. We also deal with animals and disasters. And so I am the Animals and Disasters Coordinator, and that's why I'm boring you with this presentation. So what I do in that role is I help folks like you guys with personal planning. So we know that folks in the state of Utah are very capable, very independent, but also very community minded. And so a lot of times our disaster responses, when they do occur, are really going to be locally focused because people really like to help their neighbors and they like to be prepared. And so I like to try to help folks figure out how to best plan for themselves and their communities because we know that a lot of times government isn't going to be involved. The other thing that I do is I help municipalities, so cities and counties and business entities, make their plans for animals and disasters. I'm working on a number of initiatives to get people and resources connected with city and county plans so that if a city needs help, they know how to reach out to. And then I sit at what's called the SEOC, the State Emergency Operations Center. And so if a disaster happens that's big enough that the state needs to be involved, I get called in and I help try to fill problems that might occur for animals. So basically, you can sum up my role as being a subject matter expert. And so, how, as a veterinarian, do I learn how to be a subject matter expert in disaster response? And I'll tell you, in vet school, we don't really learn a lot about that. And so, when I got assigned this part of my job, did a lot of reading, a lot of learning. I sort of go out into the community and help on different responses. But one of the main resources is this organization called NASEP, the National Alliance of State Animal and Agricultural Emergency Programs. So if you really want to dig into this kind of stuff, this is a great resource. They have white papers, and that's sort of what sets the standard for what we try to achieve in our disaster responses. So I get most of my information from people in states that do have a lot more disasters than, knock on wood, we do here in Utah. So, just to give you kind of a general background of how emergency managers plan for disasters, and I'll say that emergency managers are a government position. Every city, every county, every state has somebody that's their emergency manager. In more rural and smaller areas, the emergency manager is also often the sheriff or the mayor. So these are folks who are super busy, and so that's why it's great for me to be able to help them out to make a plan because they don't have time to do all this research on their own. So in emergency response and preparedness land, there's something called an all hazards approach. And this is the idea that when we're preparing for something bad that might happen, we don't specifically plan for different types of bad things. So we don't have a plan for wildfires that's separate from a plan for, a cyber attack that's separate from a disease outbreak. We have one plan, and then little details can be changed. And so the reasons why you might want to use an all hazards approach is that you're making a plan ahead of time, but you only have to make one, but it is specific to your particular location. So your farm, your city, your county, whatever. And then it also helps you, having this plan helps you develop capability and capacity. And so if you do this planning ahead of time, yes, it's going to help you during a disaster, but it's also just going to help you be a more productive um, facility. So a more productive farm, more organized farm. People are going to be able to help you maybe go on vacation at some point if you want, and you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. So if we have these things in place, we've seen that it's safer for the farms. It decreases losses due to a number of different issues. You get a faster turnaround time in terms of recovering from a disaster. And like I said, it increases your productivity on the farm. This photo down here is a photo of down in Sevier County of the fire that was happening last summer. So, how the heck do you go about making an emergency plan? Hopefully, I've convinced you that it's something you might want to consider doing. So, now I'll walk you through the steps. So, emergency preparedness is super overwhelming. I sort of describe it as trying to eat an elephant. It's a really multi-step process, really daunting. All of this stuff on the slide here is things that we might want to consider, but I think that's really overwhelming, and especially for you guys, you're probably looking at that and freaking out. So, what I say is I like to slim it down to a three-step process. So our three basic steps are first, we want to make a plan. Second, we want to communicate the plan. And third, we want to make an emergency preparedness kit, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with on the personal preparedness side, having an evacuation kit for your family. We also want to do that for any animals that we might be responsible for. And obviously, this is a farms conference, but I'm a veterinarian. And so obviously, I'm concerned about all animals, human, pet, and livestock. So keeping in mind that these principles also apply to your non-human counterparts, no matter what species they might be. So step one, making the plan. This is definitely the most comprehensive part here. There are a million different templates you can use out there. This one picture that I've included here is from the AVMA, which is the American Veterinary Medical Association. It's the group of all the vets around the US. And there's a bunch of different templates. If you would like a template, there's some linked on our website, which I'll show you later, and you can also just email me and ask. But the key features of a plan are what you're going to do if you decide to stay, what you're going to do if you decide to leave, what should happen if you're not home when disaster strikes, a contact list, a map of your facility, and then an inventory of what you've got on your farm. So the first step is what you might do if you're sheltering in place. And this is probably the most complicated part of your plan. So this is a photo here of a volunteer who is taking care of some animals that had to stay in place during the Camp Fire in California. So the reasons that you might decide to shelter in place are numerous, but sometimes it's you don't have any time to leave before a disaster strikes, or you don't have trailers or the help or the training of your animals to get them on trailers to get them to go, or you don't know where you might take them if you're leaving, which we'll talk about in a little bit. How you would do this is you would gather supplies that you might need to stay in place. You would harden your property, which is what we talk about in terms of making sure that whatever disaster is happening or could happen has lesser impact. So you can see here this property, they've taken down some of the plastic covering over their greenhouses because that's a potential fire hazard. And they have no vegetation anywhere around. And so you can see that this is a nice dirt patch, and that's not really likely to catch on fire. Potentially to harden this property, they also might have been hosing down that wooden barn, and hopefully that barn is built of fire-resistant material. Then the other thing you're going to do is you're going to notify the emergency response folks that you are staying in place, that you are sheltering in place, so that they know what people and animals are there, so that they can help you out with that. Now, obviously, sheltering in place is not recommended if there's an evacuation order, but sometimes it's what has to be done. So having a plan for how to weather some type of storm, how to stay on your facility and care for your animals if you don't have electricity or water or feed is really important. The next part of your plan is going to address what you might need if you need to evacuate. So this is a photo here of a small farm that ended up having to shelter their animals in their neighbor's barn. And it looks like the barn probably didn't hold animals before, but it looks like a pretty comfy space for those animals to be held in now. So when you are given an evacuation order, use every resource you can to try to get out of there. We know that it takes a lot of time for animals to load onto a trailer, to get all the supplies you might need, a lot longer than it might take to evacuate just a human family. And so we want to think about the minute you think that there might be an evacuation order or even evacuation recommendation, we highly recommend that you do everything within your power to take advantage of that lead time and to get the heck out of there. In places where there are often wildfires, for example, like in California, the animal communities actually get prior warning of an evacuation because the emergency responders know that it takes more time to get 40 horses on trailers and to move them out of the area. And so this is just something to be thinking about, and really good that you guys are tied into this extension network, because extension are going to be some of the first people that we notify, so that they can spread out to you all that there might be an evacuation order that's put in place. Other things to add to your plan when you're going are food and water. We like to have at least 72 hours, if not a week's worth of food and water. Trailers and, any sort of fences and enclosures you might need to set up a holding facility for those animals somewhere else. Bedding, husbandry tools, all that kind of thing. So when you're making your evacuation plan, you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to load all my stuff and my animals up into trailers. Where the heck are we going? And so this is where I'm going to kind of chat with you about what is required by your municipality to plan. So after Hurricane Katrina, you guys might have heard that there were a lot of people who were trying to evacuate with their animals or were forced to leave their animals behind. And a lot of not great outcomes happened in terms of humans and animals, especially pets. And so after Hurricane Katrina, this PETS Act was put into place that requires any city or county that accepts FEMA funding to have a plan before, during, and after disasters for people, service animals, and their pets. And so, unfortunately, that does not include farm animals. So, what I'm really trying to underlie here is that while your city, county, state has a plan for you and your pets, they do not have a plan for your livestock. And that's because livestock is, considered property, and property is your responsibility to take care of, which is another great reason why you might want to have an emergency plan. So what counts as a pet, just so you know? So on the left side of the screen here, we've got cats, dogs, birds, rabbits, which also incorporates some rodents, and then turtles, but not tortoises. So that's officially the species that a city or county needs to plan for. On the right-hand side, you see we've got our service animals. Those would be animals that are specifically trained to do a specific medical duty, and they can only be certain types of dogs and horses. So, like I said, if you have animals that are not one of these categories, then it's your responsibility to come up with a plan for how to handle them. Now, that being said, especially in a lot of rural places, there are plans that exist from your emergency manager to help take care of those farm animals because we know that, in some disasters, farm animals are going to be moved or are going to have to stay in place. And we want to try to support you as much as possible. But the best way to give your animals the best outcome is to have a plan yourself. So, getting back to that, the third part of your emergency plan should be a bit of a plan of what to do if an emergency strikes and you're not at home. And so the big thing with this is identifying ahead of time substitute caretakers. So people, neighbors, family, friends, other industry groups like local cattlemen's, farm bureau, wool growers, 4-H, FFA, people who can step in and help you. And then the third thing is going to be letting the emergency responders, letting extension, letting your extended network know you're not home and that you need someone to help take care of your animals. So with those three scenarios, the evacuation, the sheltering in place, and the you're not home when something happens, we want to think about all the people that you might need to contact in those three scenarios and collect all their contact information and distribute it to a bunch of different locations. So you're going to want to have all your emergency contacts, just like for your human emergency response, fire, police, your veterinarian, your doctor, but other things you want to keep in mind are, feed suppliers, your farm insurance policy, your buddy farm, I like to call this. So this would be a facility, maybe the next county over, maybe a few hours away, a place that you've already identified with people that you know who've agreed to say, hey, if I have a disaster in my home place, can I bring my animals to yours and vice versa? Remote contacts are people who live sort of outside of your community who would be good people to reach out to who know what your emergency plan is in case nobody knows where you are or what's happened to you or your animals. Other people that you could add to this list would be us at the state veterinarian's office. You see your local extension office, anybody involved in like getting you supplies for your facility. Brand inspectors here in Utah are a great resource. And like I said, those other organizations. The next part of your plan, and again, like I said, the making the plan part is the most overwhelming, so bear with, is we're going to want to have a map of your facility. And this is really important, for people to know where all the animals and resources are on your farm, but also to make sure that emergency responders don't get hurt on your facility if they're helping you out. So there's this great resource. It's the Farm Mapper with two P's. You can find online. It is a really nice way that you can just go online and click these little tags and make a cute little map of your facility that shows the buildings, the roads, fence lines, where the animals are, and then especially where there might be hazards. So, if you have in a manure pit, making sure to identify that so somebody doesn't accidentally walk across it if it's frozen, or where you have your fuel stored or your fertilizer stored, because those could be things that are really dangerous during a fire, for example. This is kind of a fun thing to do, and we have a lot of videos that show you how to make these maps if you're interested. And then the final part of your plan is your inventory. So obviously, I care most about your animal inventory. We can see all the animals with AI raising their weird hands. So that's a fun little photo to circle what's wrong with it. There's a chicken there that looks like it has 3 wings and hooves. But we want to look on our inventory and write down how many animals we have of what species, where they live on your facility. You can kind of link this to your map. And then we also, if you can, have official IDs of those animals, any photos or identification. In case those animals get loose, we can match them to you. So making sure that you have all this information in a paper copy as well as in digital formats. And then other inventory items that might be important for insurance purposes or fire hardening purposes or emergency response purposes would be your crops, machinery and equipment, and then also any hazardous substances you might have on the farm. So the next step is communicating this plan. So, like I said, once you've gotten all this planning done, and this is very overwhelming, I know, but we can help you out with it. What you want to do is you want to tell people what your plan is. And as I mentioned before, it's great to have a buddy farm far away that you can have a plan as to where you can take your animals to, but also letting your neighbors and friends and family know. Letting those remote contacts know. So if you are unable to be contacted during emergency, they've got a copy of your emergency plan and they can read it off to a responders and say, hey, it says here if there's an emergency that the Smith family is going to evacuate to this location, and then we can try to contact you in that way. It's also really great to let your local animal response organizations know. So let your local extension office know what your plan might be, and then any caretakers. And the really important thing here is that we just want everybody to be in great communication. The best way to respond to an emergency is just to be in touch. And we know that a lot of times in emergencies, communications can be down or overwhelmed. And so letting folks know ahead of time what you might do is really, really useful. And then our final step is to make these emergency preparedness kits. So on the right-hand side, you can see a kit that would be suggested for people. And we have the same sort of kits for animals. So you can see we've got a horse and livestock one here, as well as a poultry and rabbit one. We also have some evacuation forms on our website if you'd ever like to print those out and use them. And so the key thing here is that we want to make a personal one. We want to have a kit that would support us during shelter in place. So having enough water and food on hand all the time to be able to weather at least 3 days, if not a week. We'd want to have a mobile kit so that we have things ready to when we can evacuate. And that kit would include a trailer that you make sure is registered. You make sure the tires pressure is good every once in a while. You make sure that the floorboards aren't rotting out so that we go to load animals in the trailer and we don't cause more issues. And then another kit to keep in place would be things that you might want to do on your facility to harden it if we have notification of an emergency coming. So for example, for a wildfire, that would be making sure we've got hoses that can reach far enough to hose down roofs of buildings, or a brush hog or lawnmowers that's enough fuel so that we can cut down weeds close to buildings to keep things from lighting. So these are all sort of the kits that you might want to think of. And again, every step of this process, there are a million different resources online that you'll see. They all differ slightly, but they all have basically the same core tenets. So, like I said, we've got a website here to help you out. Full disclosure, our website is under construction, so this is what it looks like currently. It might be changing in the future. Under the preparing your animals for disasters portion, we've got those evacuation kit checklists, as well as guidance. Right now, I've put one together for wildfire, but in the future, I will have specific guidance for other types of disasters. And then under the preparing your community tab, this is for groups of people who are looking to help out and get ready for their animals in their community. So this could be anything from a 4-H group to a city to a not-for-profit. And finally, like I said, there have been a million different resources developed online. So this is just a small smattering of places that you can go to get information on animals in disasters. Pretty much every state extension office has resources, most state veterinarians' offices, and lots of different not-for-profits and universities. So thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, my name's Dr. Sabo. You've got our phone number to our office there and our email address if you guys have any questions. Would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabo, and I'm so sorry for mispronouncing your name in the beginning.
No
I'll definitely
worries.
remember that. I don't see any questions in the Q&A right now, but we have about 15 minutes before our next presentation is scheduled to start. So if people have questions,
I
please
do.
put them in the chat. Oh, Cody, go ahead.
There's also a comment in the chat just asking for some of those links to be added to the chat so they can make use of them.
Oh, great.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll go ahead and add our, oops, let's see if I can find my chat here. There we go. I'll go ahead and add our website on here. And then I will add some of those organizations and links to those planning guides. So since we've got some time, what I can say is that if you have a local group, for example, if you have a 4-H group or a group of like-minded producers in your area, please reach out and I would be happy to do, a more targeted workshop for you where we work on putting together these emergency response protocols. In addition, the extension agents in each county, we're working on an initiative where those extension agents are going to get a little bit more training in emergency response. Our goal is to have the livestock agents be a conduit between the local animal community and the emergency response apparatus. So your emergency manager, your fire chief, that sort of thing, so that if there is a disaster, the emergency responders know how to get in contact with the animal people and vice versa.
Great. We did have we have two questions now. One is, how do people contact you to discuss another speaking engagement?
So yeah, definitely just shoot me an email there, Sabo, Sabo at utah.gov, or go ahead and give our office a call.
Great. And then Tyrell asked, what was your favorite emergency success?
Oh, well, okay. Great question. So like I said, in Vetland, we don't really learn about any of this. And so full disclosure, I'm super new to it. And Utah is what we call a blue sky state. So it's a place where we don't have a ton of huge disasters. And like I referenced earlier, Utah is a really robust state in terms of personal response. So for most situations, the disasters start and end locally, and I never hear about it. So it's something that what we're really trying to do is develop these networks so that everybody kind of knows about the initiatives that are happening in each area. And if there are opportunities to be filled, then we can help address them. But it's not really livestock related, but on the small animal side, here in Salt Lake County, there was a pretty devastating fire in an apartment complex where there were, I want to say, like 70 families displaced. And unfortunately, there wasn't an existing relationship between animal entities that had capability and the government. And so after that happened, that was corrected. And so there was another apartment fire, much smaller, of course, but all of the people and animals were able to be evacuated. The animals actually got veterinary care that night and some of them were actually fully vaccinated, spayed and neutered, and into a little shelter for within 24 hours of the situation. And then once those animals were held until their owners could find pet-friendly housing after their homes burned down. And so those animals were able to be reunited with their owners. So that's kind of, not a livestock thing, but one of the initiatives that's happening on the local level. And I think the huge success in that situation is that I wasn't involved at all. All the local community banded together, they communicated with each other, and they were able to provide those resources in a great way. So I think that would be my answer as of now. And hopefully it stays that way. Hopefully we don't have that many disasters to respond to. But unfortunately, like I suggested, we do live on that Wasatch Fault line, us in the Wasatch Front. And so we're kind of in this situation where we don't have a lot of smaller scale things to help us practice. But and not to be alarmist, but at any day, that earthquake could erupt. We're overdue, and our entire lives could be upended, or it could never happen. So there you go.
Right, right. Thanks. Hey,
Yeah,
I have another question about a part of your presentation that I thought was really interesting that you mentioned. So you
yeah.
mentioned how you guys will go out and do some educational interventions on site. Could you maybe add a little bit more information on what would be an appropriate request for that versus maybe what would be inappropriate for somebody utilizing you guys at the state office, and then maybe what your lead time is on being able to come out?
In terms of diseases?
Yeah, just because you had mentioned how you guys will go out and do site visits to teach a little bit. So maybe just describe like what kind of requests would be appropriate for a site visit versus what you wouldn't do.
Sure, absolutely. So if we have the time, we are totally happy to come out to any livestock business. So again, we work in the Department of Agriculture and Food. So if we've got a backyard farm that's not um, really a business entity, then the ask might be a little steep for that one. But if we have the time, we are happy to come out and help assess biosecurity, disease risk preparedness, any other type of risk preparedness, whenever. If groups of neighbors want to get together and have us come out and do a tour day neighborhood and make some recommendations, we would be happy to do that. We are happy to present to any sort of industry groups, 4-H, FFA. If we're not in the middle of a disease outbreak, then we really try to spend as much of our time meeting producers, getting out in the field, and just helping promote healthy and safe animal agriculture across Utah.
Awesome. Well, it looks like there's one more question that's popped up regarding NGOs. I'm guessing that would be similar to like an ag business if they do some sort of, charity style work with animals.
Yes, yeah. There are some caveats there in terms of if a not-for-profit organization has an anti-animal agricultural agenda, then that might be kind of a hard sell. But other than that, yes, we're very open to working for not-for-profit organizations. And those entities, of course, any sort of animal business or any place that houses a large number of animals, we are really interested in making sure that they have an animal plan because, like I said, any kind of livestock is not going to be involved in your city and county's plan, and it's your responsibility to take care of those animals no matter what happens. So, as much as possible, if we as animal advocates can make sure that the animals are not a drain on the county and city resources, that's going to be huge. And so really the point of all this is self-sufficiency, right? Is helping connect animal folks with other animal folks so that we can help make a plan. So I guess I should add another caveat to the NGO thing. I'll say if it's a place that houses more animals that could fit on like a car, then yeah, I'm happy to help them make an emergency plan. I might not be able to come out and visit necessarily, given that I am I am a worker of the Department of Agriculture and Food, and so that's we get it kind of gets sticky there. But if you have any interest, please let me know. Yeah, actually, Dr. Page and Dr. Okoyo and I are working with a not-for-profit organization that we've been working with for like a year and a half, trying to help them develop animal protocols and plans and become a more successful entity. So I'm excited to do more of that in the future.
There is one final question along those lines. What is your travel radius
The
of the
whole
entire
state.
state?
Yep. Yep.
Entire state.
We really like to try to plan visits to the more rural areas and find excuses to get out there. So we would love invitations to come to anywhere in the state. And especially if we can sort of combine trips for a number of different reasons, we love to do that.
Andrea, do you mind if I just ask one quick follow-up before?
Yeah. Before you do that, Dr. Sabo, could I have you stop sharing your screen and we'll have Dr. Oko have his screen go, but please stay and keep talking while we're getting things set up. So go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, so my question is kind of for all the folks. I noticed back during Dr. Page's um, presentation, there were a lot of folks from out of state. For those people out of state, I'm imagining their departments of ag have resources for that, but is there kind of a keyword for them to search, or should they just call their local department?
Yeah, I think reaching out, so it is crazy how different every state is set up. Just to kind of give you guys a peek behind the curtain, every state veterinarian does not work within their state Department of Agriculture. Some of them work within brand boards, some of them are their own office, and not every state veterinarian has jurisdiction over all of the domestic animals in their state. Sometimes they only have jurisdiction over horses and cows. Sometimes they only have jurisdiction over livestock. So here in Utah, we do have jurisdiction over every domestic animal, and then we have a separate wildlife veterinarian who fills in on all the wildlife. But every state is different. So what I would say in other states is that if you want to just Google the name of your state and then animal emergency preparedness or farm emergency preparedness, then those resources are going to pop up for you. And then if you reach out to your local land grant university, so that would be whatever hosts your extension. So for us, it's Utah State University, as you all know. But every state has a land grant institution. That's what their extension service is based out of, and that is going to be a good place to start as well. Here in Utah, the emergency preparedness side of our extension program is still being developed, but they would know to get you in contact with me. So there we go.
Great. I actually do have one final question for you that I would love to hear. Is that so? When I think about emergency preparedness for myself, and I have a small, very small operation, but we've got a lot of different kinds of animals here, it's a little bit overwhelming and a little bit scary. So if we walked away and you said, do one thing today, one thing to get started on emergency preparedness, what would you suggest for people?
Yeah, I think the easiest step is one of those small pieces of step one, which is making your plan, and that's your contact list. And so that contact list can be pretty comprehensive, but just start by writing down the names and phone numbers of people who you might need to reach out to during an emergency, neighbors, friends. I think you mentioned that you have goats. And so Dr. Page might be one of those contacts. And then putting that contact list in your phone, on your computer, emailing it to yourself so you always have access to it, printing it out, posting it in your barn, posting it in your house, just making it, putting it in your car glove box, just making a bunch of copies of that contact list. And while you're in the process of making that contact list, it's going to keep you thinking, okay, who could be my buddy farm? Who's somebody a few counties over that I might want to reach out to and start the conversation of, hey, do you want to be my emergency preparedness buddy? Let's work through this together. Because group projects, though frustrating, are always more fruitful. And then the other part of that contact list would be thinking about your remote contact. So who do you know in a different state? Who do you know outside the Wasatch Front? Who might, you could just send them the idea of, hey, I've got at home right now 3 cows, 3 sheep, a whole bunch of chickens, and 5 kids. And just letting them know, this is what we've got on the home farm right now. And if anybody, if anything happens and anybody reaches out to you about us, this is what we are, this is what we might do. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think that's great advice and something that we all should be able to do, without a lot of work, just thinking about it. So,
yeah. And on that
okay.
front as well, one of the things I didn't mention, but it's pretty common on the small animal side, for people to have a little sticker on their front door that says, this is our contact phone number. This is how many animals are in this house. In case if you're not home, emergency responders or neighbors can help. And I would recommend you do the same thing and just say, and also out back, on another sticker, we've got a whole bunch of other animals.
That's a great idea. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us. We really appreciate you joining us today. If you're able to, Dr. Sabo, stay around. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A that you should just be able to access and type the answer in. But we really appreciate the information, and I'm guessing you'll be hearing from a lot of folks on this webinar. So thank you so much.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Yep.